The night was colder than I had expected. The city lights flickered against the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, reflecting the chaos that had quietly crept into my life. My name is Emily Harper, and to most, I was just another ambitious, friendly girl chasing her dreams. But beneath that calm exterior, a storm had been brewing. A storm fueled by betrayal, lies, and broken trust. It all started 6 months ago. People I thought were my friends, even my boyfriend, had conspired against me in the most ruthless way imaginable. They had humiliated me, stolen what was rightfully mine, and thought I would never come back from the ruin they orchestrated. But they underestimated one thing: me. Tonight, as I watched the city from my tiny apartment, a single thought consumed me. Revenge doesn't wait. And neither do I. That's every step I would take from now on, every smile I'd fake, every secret I'd exploit, was part of a plan that they would never see coming. They had underestimated my patience, my intelligence, and my will. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around me like the dark promises I was about to fulfill. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. But the fire inside me was just beginning. And tonight, the game begins. Emily had spent weeks watching, waiting, and planning, each day carefully noting every weakness, every habit, every secret of those who had betrayed her. She knew that revenge wasn't just about anger. It was about precision, patience, and psychology. Tonight, her first target would feel the sting of betrayal as she had felt it. She slipped into her black leather jacket, the cold wind biting at her face as she walked through the deserted streets toward the apartment of her former best friend, Jessica, the one who had started the chain of lies that ruined her. Emily's mind raced with the possibilities. How to strike without being seen. How to leave just enough evidence to make Jessica feel the creeping paranoia Emily had endured for months. She remembered the humiliating party, the whispers behind her back, the stolen promotion she had deserved, and the smirk on Jessica's face as she celebrated Emily's downfall. With every step closer, Emily felt the power surge through her veins, the calm determination masking the storm inside her. She wasn't here to destroy everything at once. She was here to make them taste the fear, the doubt, the helplessness she had lived through. Peering through the window, she saw Jessica laughing on the phone, completely unaware, completely vulnerable. Emily smiled, and a whisper of a plan formed on her lips. A plan that would slowly unravel Jessica's world, just as her own had been unraveled. Tonight was only the beginning, and Emily knew that one small act, one perfectly executed move, could start a chain reaction that would leave everyone who wronged her questioning every choice, every friendship, and every secret they had ever held. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the sweet anticipation of justice, carefully measured, deliberately slow, and irresistibly inevitable. The night air was thick with tension as Emily positioned herself across the street from Jessica's apartment, every muscle in her body taut with anticipation, every thought honed like a sharpened blade. As she watched the lights flicker in the window, heard the faint hum of music through the thin walls, and noted every movement, every gesture, as if committing them to memory for the performance of revenge that was about to unfold. Emily had prepared meticulously, creating a digital trail of evidence that would make Jessica question her own reality. Anonymous messages, subtle signs that someone was watching. A careful leak of a private secret that Emily knew Jessica believed was safe. Her fingers hovered over her phone, sending the first anonymous message. "You're not as clever as you think." The small, innocuous text seemed harmless to anyone else, but Jessica froze, her laughter fading as a chill ran down her spine. Emily smiled quietly to herself, savoring the precise moment of doubt she had orchestrated. She had not yet revealed herself, not yet stepped into the light. This was psychological warfare, a game of chess where the first move was already crushing her opponent's confidence. Emily's heart raced with a mixture of adrenaline and satisfaction as she watched Jessica pace, checking her phone repeatedly, paranoia creeping into every movement. And while the world outside remained oblivious, inside that apartment, Emily's revenge had already begun. Subtle, surgical, and devastatingly effective, planting the seeds of fear that would blossom into chaos. Each small act, each carefully placed hint, was a message that Emily was no longer the girl they had underestimated. She was the storm they could not control. And tonight, the first crack in their fortress of arrogance had finally appeared. Emily sat in the shadowed corner of her favorite late-night cafe, her laptop open, so coffee cooling beside her, but her mind was far from the mundane warmth of the room. It was deep inside the tangled web of her own making, a complex lattice of deceit, subtle manipulation, and careful observation. The first strike had been merely a spark, a test to see how far the paranoia would reach, and now she was ready to ignite the blaze. Jessica's reactions had been perfect. Hesitation, self-doubt, whispers of fear creeping into conversations with friends who began noticing her distracted, jittery behavior. Emily's plan required patience. Patience she had in abundance. Every text, every anonymous tip, every slightly altered social media post was a piece in a growing puzzle designed to isolate her enemies from one another, to make them question loyalties they had once taken for granted. And she had mapped out every route Jessica might take, every friend who could be influenced, and every potential slip that could be used against them. Emily's nights were now consumed by this strategy, stalking public records, learning schedules, discovering vulnerabilities she could exploit later. The thrill of it coursed through her veins, a dark satisfaction that mixed both danger and control. She even began leaving subtle hints at their workplace, small errors, mysterious emails, a shadow of presence that could not be traced, all while maintaining the perfect facade of the quiet, friendly colleague everyone thought she was. Emily understood fear intimately now, how it could twist logic, bend judgment, and crumble confidence with the right amount of pressure, and she wielded it like a scalpel, precise, deliberate, and merciless. To Jessica's small missteps, the way her voice faltered in meetings, the suspicious glances exchanged with former allies, each one was music to Emily's ears, proof that her strategy was working, that the foundations of betrayal were cracking under invisible weight. And yet, Emily knew that the battle was far from over. The first strike had been psychological, the second phase would involve confrontation, but not before she had ensured that every move she made left an imprint of doubt, a lingering whisper that she was always watching, always calculating, and that no one who had wronged her could hide forever. As the cafe lights dimmed, and the city beyond shimmered with the promise of night, Emily leaned back in her chair, a quiet smile curling at the edge of her lips, knowing that soon, very soon, the world of those who had betrayed her would bend in ways they could never anticipate, and every laugh they had shared at her expense would be repaid tenfold with a fear so palpable it would leave them sleepless, questioning, and ultimately broken. This was no longer just revenge. It was art, a meticulous, calculated masterpiece, and Emily was its undisputed architect, orchestrating chaos with a patience that only made the coming storm more inevitable, more unstoppable, and far more devastating than anyone could imagine. Emily's plan had been simmering for weeks, and tonight, the carefully constructed pressure cooker of doubt, paranoia, and subtle sabotage was finally reaching its boiling point. She moved with quiet precision through the dimly lit streets, her steps measured, her heart pounding with anticipation, not fear. So every detail had been accounted for. The timing of messages, the positioning of evidence, the way each manipulated event would ripple into Jessica's social circle and workplace, leaving trails that pointed everywhere and nowhere at once. She had learned their routines intimately. Jessica's weekly meetings, her casual phone calls, the people she trusted implicitly, and Emily exploited each detail like a master chess player exploiting an opponent's predictable opening. The first email she sent tonight was innocent enough on the surface. A simple forwarded message with a hidden attachment, carefully designed to reveal a private secret in the most public way possible. She watched from across the street as Jessica opened it, her smile frozen, eyes widening in disbelief and panic, hands trembling slightly as she tried to close her laptop. But it was too late. The evidence had already spread to a network of colleagues, friends, and social acquaintances, all of whom had now glimpsed the shadow of Jessica's lies. Emily's phone buzzed continuously with updates she had orchestrated. Anonymous messages from fabricated accounts confirming suspicions Jessica didn't even realize she had planted herself. Every whisper of gossip, every subtle rumor, every glance of judgment from those who once admired Jessica now felt like shards of ice in her chest, and Emily relished the controlled destruction unfolding before her eyes. She didn't rush, didn't gloat aloud. The power of revenge lay in observation, in letting the dominoes fall exactly as she intended, each one a testament to patience, planning, and precision. Jessica's world, once so confident and untouchable, it was unraveling in real time, and Emily knew that the psychological blow had already been dealt. The fear, the shame, the helplessness were exactly as she had envisioned. Yet even as the first wave of chaos crashed over her enemy, Emily remained calm, already calculating the next move, because this was only the beginning of a larger masterpiece. The first strike had revealed just how fragile their alliances were, how susceptible to manipulation, how ready for complete dismantlement. Tonight, Emily realized with chilling satisfaction that revenge was not just a single act. It was a process, a slow burn, a meticulous dismantling of the facade that had caused her so much pain. And as she walked back into the shadows, blending seamlessly with the night, she allowed herself a quiet, yet triumphant thought. They would never see her coming until it was far too late, and by the time they realized the storm had been orchestrated by someone they had underestimated, it would be already unstoppable, inevitable, and devastating beyond measure. Emily watched silently from a distance as the subtle tremors of her meticulously executed plan began to ripple into waves of chaos. Jessica, once so poised and untouchable, now moved through her days like a puppet with tangled strings, constantly looking over her shoulder, doubting every word, every glance, every ally she once trusted. Emily's manipulation had been subtle, but relentless. Anonymous emails hinting at betrayal, strategically leaked secrets that caused friends to whisper behind Jessica's back, and carefully crafted social media posts that cast shadows over her reputation. And Emily had become invisible in their world, a ghost architect of their unraveling, and the beauty of her strategy lay in how they blamed each other, how they questioned their own judgments, how fear became a silent tyrant ruling every interaction. The once confident circle of friends and colleagues was now fractured, suspicious glances replacing laughter, whispered doubts replacing conversations, and Emily's satisfaction grew with each subtle domino falling exactly where she intended. Every misstep Jessica made, every reaction of panic, only fueled Emily's drive and reinforced the precision of her plan, confirming that revenge was not a single strike, but a cascade of consequences that she controlled entirely. Paragraph 2. Emily's evenings were consumed by observation and calculation, analyzing every ripple she had set in motion. The thrill was intoxicating, watching the psychological collapse she had engineered without ever stepping into the light. She had even introduced minor misdirections, small but deliberate, that made Jessica question her own sanity, a shadow where no one should have been, a whisper of a rumor originating from a friend who had never spoken about it before, and the illusion of betrayal appearing where none existed. Jessica's stress manifested physically. Her hands trembled, her voice faltered, and her confidence disintegrated in meetings, in friendships, even in casual social gatherings. Emily documented everything meticulously, knowing that each tiny break in composure was a confirmation of her calculated influence. And while Emily never gloating openly, the quiet satisfaction was addictive. The realization that years of betrayal and humiliation were being repaid in a slow, poetic dismantling that left her enemies blind to the architect of their ruin. The power was not in chaos alone, but in control over chaos, in patience, and in precision. and Emily wielded it with surgical expertise. Paragraph 3. But Emily knew that subtlety alone would not suffice forever. The time was approaching when the hidden pressure she had applied for weeks would erupt fully, and Jessica's fragile defenses would collapse entirely under the weight of truth twisted into paranoia. Emily had already prepared for the final act. The pieces were in place for the ultimate exposure, the undeniable revelation that would leave Jessica isolated, distrusted, and humiliated in the most public and personal ways possible. But each carefully planted hint, each small psychological shock, had weakened her opponent's defenses and aligned the stage for the inevitable climax. As Emily leaned back in the shadows, sipping her coffee in the quiet of the late-night city, she felt a calm satisfaction mixed with exhilaration. Revenge was no longer just a thought. It had become a living, breathing entity that moved with calculated inevitability, a storm of justice that would finally, irreversibly, topple those who had dared to cross her. And in that moment, Emily realized that the world she had rebuilt through meticulous planning was ready to deliver the reckoning she had long promised herself, a reckoning that would leave no corner untouched and no betrayal unpunished. Emily had spent months constructing a perfect storm, and tonight, every thread she had woven came together like a tapestry of carefully orchestrated chaos. Jessica's world, once pristine and untouchable, was now a fragile house of cards, trembling on the edge of collapse. Emily moved through the city with an unshakable calm, each step purposeful, each glance calculated. Her phone buzzed with notifications, each one a small victory. Messages from colleagues confirming the rumors, social media interactions subtly amplifying her manipulated truths, and even Jessica's closest friends expressing concern over her increasingly erratic behavior. Emily's satisfaction was deep, but measured. She knew that the final moments of impact required patience, allowing fear, doubt, and betrayal to simmer before the ultimate exposure. That as she approached the place where the culmination of her plan would unfold, a high-profile party where Jessica would be surrounded by everyone she once trusted, Emily's mind replayed every slight, every humiliation, every stolen opportunity she had endured. Tonight would not just be revenge. It would be a masterclass in retribution, the kind that left no escape, no forgiveness, and no possibility of denial. The room was buzzing with laughter and music, but Emily's eyes were fixed on Jessica, whose face betrayed a flicker of unease she could not disguise. Every whisper of doubt Emily had planted over weeks had grown roots, and now it manifested as visible tension. Emily's plan had been subtle yet devastating. A carefully edited video, innocuous on the surface, leaked to the exact right people, and documents revealing Jessica's manipulations and betrayals displayed where they could not be ignored. Gasps filled the room as eyes turned, the facade of control Jessica had maintained so meticulously crumbling before her peers. Emily watched silently, a shadow in the corner, as the once powerful queen of social circles became the subject of whispered judgment, stammered apologies, and a growing isolation she could never have imagined. There was no gloating in Emily's eyes, only the steady satisfaction of justice executed with precision. The same friends and colleagues who had once celebrated Jessica's success now questioned her motives, her credibility, even her sanity. Every moment was a testament to Emily's careful planning, the long hours of observation, patience, and subtle manipulation coming to fruition in a single, unrelenting wave of exposure that left Jessica powerless. As the night wore on, Jessica retreated from the center of attention, her confidence shattered, her once unshakable persona replaced by doubt, fear, and shame. Emily moved quietly, almost imperceptibly, leaving one last anonymous message, a final whisper that confirmed the inevitability of her downfall. "You should have seen this coming." The guests began to murmur, the connections she had built over months, carefully manipulated emails, subtle leaks, the orchestration of small but public betrayals, forming a perfect storm of social and professional devastation. Emily stood in the shadows, watching the culmination of her strategy, and for the first time in months, allowed herself a deep, contented breath. Justice had been delivered, meticulously, without a single misstep. Without impulsive vengeance, only calculated precision. And as she slipped out of the party unnoticed, blending into the night, Emily understood something profound. Revenge was not simply about hurting those who had wronged her. It was about reclaiming her power, proving to herself that patience, intelligence, and determination could topple even the strongest facades. Tonight, Emily Harper was no longer the girl who had been underestimated. She was the storm that had rewritten the rules, the quiet force whose revenge would echo in the lives of those who dared betray her, a masterful conclusion to a plan years in the making. The aftermath of Emily's calculated moves was already rippling through the lives of those who had once betrayed her, and she watched from a distance with the calm patience of someone who had mastered the art of revenge. Jessica, now visibly shaken, tried to maintain a semblance of composure among friends and colleagues. But each interaction betrayed the fear and doubt Emily had so meticulously sown. Every glance, every hesitation, every whispered conversation served as confirmation that the web Emily had spun had ensnared its target completely. She observed the subtle body language, the small, involuntary twitches that revealed Jessica's panic. And Emily allowed herself a faint smile. The kind that comes from knowing that a plan, years in the making, was finally bearing fruit. The chaos wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was precise, surgical, and deliberate, leaving no chance for reconciliation or recovery. The balance of power had shifted completely, and Emily's former tormentors were now prisoners of the fear and suspicion she had implanted. But in this quiet, controlled destruction, Emily understood the full measure of her own strength, not in brute force or anger, but in intelligence, foresight, and relentless patience. The air seemed heavier around Jessica now, as if every corner of her world had turned against her. Emily had anticipated every attempt at recovery, every desperate plea for explanations, and she had countered each one invisibly, leaving Jessica spinning in a maze of doubt and mistrust. Friends who had once been allies now hesitated to speak. Colleagues glanced with suspicion, and every interaction felt like a minefield she could not navigate. Emily had even manipulated minor financial and professional details, planting subtle evidence that suggested incompetence and deceit, ensuring that every move Jessica made only deepened her isolation. But the thrill for Emily wasn't in public humiliation alone. It was in watching the internal collapse, the way someone who had seemed untouchable began second-guessing every decision, every word, every relationship. Emily had learned that true power lay not in confrontation, but in control, in shaping the unseen currents of fear and uncertainty until her enemies were adrift with no anchor. She observed quietly, savoring each falter, each small sign of panic, each unsteady breath that betrayed Jessica's anxiety. In that room of mirrors Emily had created, every reflection was distorted, and Jessica's sense of reality was slipping like sand through her fingers. Yet Emily remained calm, almost ethereal, because she knew that the true climax, the moment when all the pieces fell together, was still to come. And when it did, it would be irreversible. Emily stood in the quiet aftermath, the echoes of her carefully orchestrated revenge still resonating through the lives of those who had once betrayed her. The chaos she had created had settled, leaving behind a landscape of shattered facades, fractured alliances, and broken egos. Jessica, who had once wielded power and influence effortlessly, now retreated into the shadows of doubt and shame, her confidence completely eroded. Emily felt no gloating, no petty triumph. What she felt was something far deeper. A serene satisfaction, the knowledge that justice had been delivered with precision, patience, and intelligence. She had transformed her pain into power, her humiliation into strategy, and her betrayal into art. Every sleepless night, every calculated move, every careful manipulation had led to this moment of undeniable victory. And as she walked away from the remnants of her enemy's shattered world, blending seamlessly into the night, Emily realized the truth she had always known, but now fully embodied. Revenge is not about destruction alone. It is about reclaiming your power, proving your strength, and showing the world, and yourself, that no betrayal is too great, no lie too clever, and no obstacle insurmountable when your mind is sharp, your patience unwavering, and your will unbreakable. Tonight, Emily Harper was no longer the girl who had been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. She was the storm, the quiet force whose vengeance reshaped the lives around her and echoed long after the night ended. And in that stillness, she allowed herself a final, deep breath of triumph, knowing that her justice had been exacted flawlessly, and the world had no choice but to recognize her as a force that could never be ignored.